Whose story is correct? Ya asked them. They looked around at the boys who had spoken, as though trying to establish their allegiance by holding a gaze, casting a vote, or sending a glance. Finally, once the murmuring subsided, Peter raised his hand. Mr. Agicum, we cannot know which story is correct. He looked at the rest of the class, slowly understanding. We cannot know which story is correct, because we were not there. Ya nodded. He sat in his chair at the front of the room, and looked at all the young men. This is the problem of history. We cannot know that which we were not there to see and hear and experience for ourselves. We must rely upon the words of others. We believe the one who has the power. He is the one who gets to write the story. So when you study history, you must always ask yourself, whose story am I missing? Whose voice was suppressed so that this voice could come forth? Once you have figured that out, you must find that story too. From there, you begin to get a clearer, yet still imperfect picture. Hello, so it is Saturday night, August 17th. Tomorrow starts the Fortnight Frights, and I am currently listening to Redefining Realness, my journey into womanhood, identity, and love, and so much more. I was looking at the bingo board for BlackOWeenAthon, and it said an author a trans black author, so I googled trans black authors, and this book sounded interesting, and it was on Scribd, so I'm listening to it. It's just over 8.5 hours, and I got about 3 hours left of it, so I was hoping to finish it tonight, but I want to finish reading Homegoing. This Redefining Womanhood, Redefining Realness, I am really enjoying it. It's a really good story, and I'm really liking the audiobook of it, and it is narrated by the author, Janet, I can't remember her last name, but there is so much, if I was physically reading this, I'd be highlighting so much, and it's a lot of work to, pause an audiobook, rewind it a little bit, write down a quote, take notes with it, and I just want to be able to listen to it and enjoy the book, but there's just so much information on it. It is her story from, birth to now, I guess. And I really like that. And it's her story, living, her parents are divorced. She's living with her dad. Well, she was living with her grandma, and then she was living with her dad, and then she was living with her mom. So it's just her own personal story, which is really interesting. But then there's also statistics and facts about being transgendered and a person of color. And that's really interesting, and how you navigate kids who are being transgender in school and coming out at school or at work or whatever, as you were a boy before, you presented as a boy before, and now you're choosing to present yourself as a girl, and how to navigate that, and why, sometimes at school, it is unsafe to tell the parents of the transgender child that they are transgender. And I remember that was a debate before about whether or not school staff had to legally tell the parents of a child if they were gay or lesbian or transgender or whatever. And I used to think, well, of course they should be telling the parents, that's a pretty big thing. The parents need to be in communication with the school and vice versa, and with the child and stuff, but I never thought, it didn't occur to me that the home could be an unsafe place. This book didn't make me realize this. I realized this a while ago, but she talks about it in the book that home isn't always a safe place for these people, and these kids only feel safe at school to be out and dress and act however they feel. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that not every home situation is safe, and we need to be able to protect these children. If my kids brought home a friend, said so-and-so is transgender or lesbian or gay or whatever, I'd want to be a safe place for that child to be in my home. Talk to them about their relationship with their parents, and is it a safe place? And if it is, encourage them to have those conversations with their parents. And if it is not a safe place, to know that we are a safe place for them. And obviously, if it was my own kids, that is something that we would have to navigate with them at that time. But yeah, I'm just really, really enjoying this book, and I'm glad that I picked it up. The author narrates it. I always hear people talking about how when an author narrates their own story, especially when it is a nonfiction, how much more impactful it is, because they know the tone of the book and how they want it to sound. And so yeah, I'm really enjoying that. So that's my update on Redefining Realness. It has some really interesting conversations about what it means to be a real woman, meaning a psi woman, like me, who's born with the right parts and in the right body, and I dress more feminine and stuff like that. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but just like gender expression. I lost my thoughts, but anyways, really good book, really enjoying it. 5 out of 5. I'm not even done it yet, but it's a nonfiction book. I can't see like how I would not like the ending of it, and I think it really does have some really great conversations. So I have been terrible at recording my thoughts after I finish a book, but that's because I have been sick and I have this dreaded cough that just is lingering as always, but my COVID test came back negative, so yay, good for that. Today is the 22nd of October, so we are on day 4 of Fortnight Frights, and I have started a couple of books for that, but haven't finished anything yet. I picked up The Only Good Indians a couple days ago, but then I wanted to read a couple stories from Things We Lost in the Fire, and I was like, oh, I'll read a couple stories a night to keep up with it. And then I saw that the live show for this is on the 24th, so in 2 days, and I am on story 2, like 40 pages into the story. So I put down The Only Good Indians to save that because the live show for that is October 31st, so I have a couple weeks to go and read that one. So far, it's not like scary or anything like that, but there's definitely creepy vibes in that one. This one, I just read the first story so far and just into this, like a page into the second one. So it is interesting for sure. Graphic. The first one was pretty graphic. Interesting. My first book I wanted to pick up for Fortnight Frights was The Year of the Witching, but I read the like prologue and then the first page and a half of the first chapter, and I said no for my own personal religious reasons. I am choosing not to read that book. Unfortunately, it sounds like it has really great writing and is a good like feminist taking down the patriarchy story, which isn't like something I normally read, but I think it would be an interesting story, but just too much. Like I knew it was a witch story and it'd be like more pagan and witch culture, but it was too not what I want to read. Anyways, for my own personal reasons, I'm going to the library now to pick up a different witch book, so hopefully that one's a little bit better. If not, I guess I just won't cover the prompt of reading about a black witch for the BlackOWeenAthon. Anyways, I am also listening to and have about 3 hours left of The Phantom of the Opera, which has been really interesting, and I am enjoying the audiobook. I've never watched the movie, but I might get the movie for that afterwards, as well as I am reading Pan's Labyrinth, which is told mainly from the view of like a 12-year-old girl, but again is not a kid's story and does have a few graphic scenes in it. But I have also not watched that movie, never really had an interest in it, but I'm actually really quite enjoying the book, so I might pick up that movie as well. But yeah, so far that's what I've been reading. I finished listening to Redefining Realness, and yeah, just listening to Phantom of the Opera, reading The Things We Lost in the Fire, DNF'd, barely even started, not even going to count it as a DNF, The Year of the Witching, and still on Dracula. The beginning was kind of interesting and gets you into the story, but the past couple hours of the book have been pretty boring, and I want to DNF it, but I also kind of want to keep going because I hear like everyone talks about how amazing of a story it is, and me and my husband are just like, the middle parts are just boring. There's not a whole lot going on, but we have 5.5 hours left of the audiobook for that, but my husband just went back to work yesterday, so he's back off just before, like 5 days before Halloween, so we'll see what we can get done anyways of that. That's my reading update, and I will see you when I have more thoughts and I go to the library and pick up that witch book. I'll talk to you later. So I picked up White is for Witching, and that does not look like a white witch to me. And I know it was called White is for Witching, but I wasn't sure the ethnicity of the character or not when I was searching for black witches. But the author is not white, so maybe I can get like a half a point for reading a witch book. I'm not sure. Anyways, this is the witch book I picked up from the library, so we'll see how this goes. And I am currently on story number 3 of Things We Lost in the Fire. I should be able to finish this. Today's Thursday. I should be able to finish it by Saturday by the live show discussion. So I am back for another book update. Things might be a little bit loud. My one daughter is home again from school because she's got a cough. Just like normal cold things, no fever or anything like that, just a little bit of a cough. I want to talk about books, but I also wanted to show my crochet project that I am working on currently. Hello, Sophie.
Hi.
She's teaching my son how to speak French, right? Your brother?
Yeah.
What's a
Goes to the roof.
What's a French word that we can teach Rylan?
Comment ça va?
Comment ça va? What does that mean?
How is it
I'm
going?
sticking some ghosts to the roof.
So Rylan, how's it going? Oh my gosh, I can't even. I have those like little sticky decoration things for Halloween. It's like a haunted house with ghosts, and he just took the ghosts and threw them onto our roof. So I can't even. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
It's rubber.
Okay, Rylan. So Sophie's.
Can I show them all the other stickers?
Not right now.
Okay. I don't know how I did that.
Oh my gosh.
Look at it, it's just wobbling.
Yeah, that little random orange thing. Anyway, I was going to show you the crochet project I've been working on and want to get finished for today. So it is a shawl, and I had this color changing like sock yarn that I don't want to make socks with. I don't really like socks necessarily, but I love this color and I wanted to make something with it. So it being like such a thin yarn, I was thinking a shawl would be a good idea. I didn't have enough of this to make a full shawl of this color, and then where I bought this from, they didn't have any more of this kind from our local store here, and I couldn't find any at like Walmart. So I just bought like this neutral color yarn that's kind of the same width and the same like fingering weight. It's a little bit different, but it works for my project. So
I have no idea how you get that.
this is the shawl.
Me neither.
So it's got a big chunk of the neutral color, and then I'm gonna outline 2 rows. Hopefully I can get it. 2 rows with this, and then the last 2 border rows with it as well. So this is my shawl. I think it's big enough now. I finished it a little while ago, and then I was like, no, it's not long enough, so I undid the last 2 rows because it was like
Now it's too big.
maybe up to like here, and then it goes down the back. I like it. It's like a super simple pattern, which is nice. It took me a few rows to get into it, but now I can do it without like looking at the pattern. But there's shells that I'm gonna stitch into these parts, to these like holes. So this is a pretty easy pattern, but I can't really do it and talk at the same time because each shell is 7. So I'm constantly having to count 7 in my head constantly for this whole pattern. It's kind of hard to concentrate. Even listening to like an audiobook or a podcast, I'll notice that I've missed a little bit just because I've been so concentrated on the counting stitches. We're not here for crochet. We are here to talk about books. So we are into the 2nd week of the Fortnight Frights, and I'm just finishing up the live show. I missed it. I went to the live show for Things We Lost in the Fire, but I missed the one for the Year of the Witching, which I didn't realize they were gonna have the author on to talk to, so that was really cool. So I missed the live show for that. So I was just like going back and watching it now. But I think I talked to you guys about, let's just say I'm in the middle of reading The Only Good Indians, and the last thing I want is for my kids to be up on top of a ladder. If you know, you know. So I think I talked about Blackwater Rising and the cutting season, and I think my last clip was about Homegoing. Maybe, if not, I'll talk about it now, I guess. So I read Homegoing by Ya Gayasi, and I really enjoyed it. It's about 2 half-sisters who know nothing about each other. This is worse than filming outside with the traffic, honestly. The traffic is better. Homegoing, two half-sisters. One ends up getting married to like a captain in the British Army who is part of the slave trade. They live at the castle on the coast, and they are they're kind of like the last stop in Africa where the slaves are brought before being shipped over to America or wherever else they may be going. So she has a couple of kids with him, or at least one kid with him anyways. But so they live in luxury. Basically, they're in a castle. She is taken out of her village, away from her abusive mother and stuff, in order to marry this British guy. So she is black, marries a white guy, so obviously her kid and future kids are... I'm too distracted. So her kid is obviously mixed and is a lighter skin color than the other African. But I guess it was pretty common for these British soldiers to take African wives, even though they had wives like back in Britain. And then they would have these children with their African wives, I guess. So that's kind of interesting. And then her half-sister is living in a village, like in a jungle deep in Africa, that gets raided, and she gets taken by these slave traders and brought to the basement of the castle where they hold the slaves before shipping them off. So she ends up going to America. So you follow both their stories. I thought that it was going to be like you're following one woman who is from, it starts like near the beginning of the slave trade. I'm not sure if it's the early 1800s or late 1700s. It's 18th century. Anyways, I thought that we were meeting this girl at the beginning who like marries the captain, and then we were going to be following somebody from like our present time. That was her ancestor. So you learn like how she ends up in the slave trade, if she becomes a slave or not. And then you're meeting somebody who's like maybe in college or something now, learning about her past. But it's not that at all. It's these two sisters in the same time period, and they're split stories. So you're following the one, and then so like one chapter is Afia, and so she gets married to this captain and then has a kid, and they live in this castle and they're in luxury. And then you see Essie, and she is living in the village. She gets captured and sold into slavery, and then she ends up in America. And then like the next chapter will be from Afia's son and how he grew up in the castle and the friends that he's made and what he's doing with his life. And then the next chapter is from like Essie's daughter in America. And it kind of goes back and forth between the two sisters' lineages. And what I really appreciate at the beginning of the book is that there is like the family tree, like the chart, so you can kind of keep up and be like, okay, this is who they're related to exactly. And it ends in like, I think early 2000s, so it spans like a couple hundred years. And it's really interesting to see from like the beginning of the slave trade into like the Civil War and like all the stuff that goes on in between those two times. And it's very interesting to think, I don't know about you, but when I think about slavery, I think about white people capturing black people and selling them into slavery. But there was Africans catching other African tribes, like one tribe enslaving another tribe and taking them to the British people to ship to America or wherever to be put into slavery. These African tribes would go into like another tribe and steal these black people and sell them to the British to be put into slavery. So it's really interesting. Like, it wasn't just white against black. There was blacks also involved in the selling of other black people. And yeah, I loved the book. It was a really interesting perspective and story, and seeing the different sides living in Africa versus in America, and one having more privilege and one being sold into slavery. Yeah, just going from like the beginning of the slave trade into like the Civil War and stuff. So I really enjoyed that, and that covered the prompt for a historical fiction. And then there was one about a prompt for a black transgendered person. So I Googled black transgender people, like authors, and I found Redefining Realness, My Path to Womanhood, Identity, Love, and So Much More by Janet Mock. And I know I talked about this one in one of my other videos. I really liked that one and gave it 5 out of 5 and listened to that one as an audio. It's just a book about discovering who she was and growing up And I really enjoyed that. In between parts of her personal story, she gives statistics. So I liked that. It wasn't a book where you're just like bogged down with statistics and you're like, this is kind of boring or too dense or really hard read. Just the fact that she was telling her own personal story of being like a sex worker and then giving statistics about transgendered people and sex work. And then she talked about like being bullied in school or rules in school when she transitioned and wanted to be called by her new name and stuff like that. And then giving statistics about transgendered people in school and things like that. So I really enjoyed that. I also finished reading Pan's Labyrinth, The Labyrinth of the Faun by Guillermo del Toro. So this is for Fortnight Frights. This is a translated book and it is from Spain, so it covers a couple of prompts. I think one of the prompts is a Latinx author. So I really enjoyed Pan's Labyrinth. I had no idea what it was because I was never interested in watching the movie. I thought because it's told from the perspective of like a 12-year-old girl for the most part, I thought it would read a little bit younger. But there are some really gruesome and disturbing details that are scenes like in the book that I would not suggest for kids, even at 12 maybe, but it's pretty bloody and about killing and stuff, so it might not be the most appropriate. I get it's, you know, if you have kids around that age and they're thinking about reading this, or you were thinking about letting them read it, obviously you can read it yourself and see what you think, or look up trigger warnings and stuff like that, but there are some like pretty bloody and gruesome death scenes, so I would definitely be aware of that. I gave that a 5 on Goodreads as well, and I, even with the gruesome details and stuff, I still really enjoyed the story. And there were some chapters that are told like they're part of a fairy tale, and then other chapters that are taking place like in the real world. And it takes place in Spain during, Goodreads says, fans of dark fairy tales like The Hazelwood and The Cruel Prince will relish this atmospheric and absorbing book based on Guillermo del Toro's critically acclaimed movie. Okay, so it was actually a movie first. Epic and dark fantasy novel for readers of all ages. Complete with haunting illustrations and enchanting short stories that flesh out the folklore of this fascinating world. So it takes place during something in Spain. I don't know if it's the Spanish, like, Civil War or something. This girl's dad dies. Her mom remarries this captain in the army. Again, the captain's in the army, and he's extremely cruel, and he just wants her to give him a son. And it's just the girl's story of going to this captain's place, this old like mill in the middle of the woods, and there is a labyrinth on the property, and it is said that there was this princess of the underground world who went up to the above ground world and disappeared, and her parents have been looking for her for hundreds of years. This girl who has moved in with this evil captain with her mother, with her pregnant mother, discovers that she's supposedly this princess and has to find her way back into the underworld. So I really enjoyed it. It was really magical and fantastical with the fairy tale elements, but also really dark and gruesome. I listened to The Phantom of the Opera, which covers the prompt of a mainland European, as this is a French book. Again, I've never seen the movie, and maybe I will watch the movie with it. I liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I don't know if I really need to go into the details of what The Phantom of the Opera is about, but they believe there is a ghost. They just call him Opera Ghost or OG. When he like signs his letters, he's like OG, and he's like demanding things from the people who run the opera, and even from the people who are part of the opera, like the singers and stuff. And he's just like a tall tale, right? But throughout it, they're trying to figure out like who he is. Yeah, those are the ghosts that they threw up on the wall, on the roof. The story is trying to figure out like who this opera ghost is and how he's running things, and is he really a ghost? Is he a person? You know. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun book. And yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed it a lot more than I am enjoying Dracula, which me and my husband have less than a week to listen to it together, and it's super boring, and we haven't gotten any farther into it. I actually have to re-download it from my library because it was returned, but we started it September 22nd. It doesn't help that it's taking so long to listen to it as well, and that's to cover the prompt of an undead character. Yeah, I don't know, it's just not catching my interest as much. It's pretty slow paced. And then I read a short story collection called Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez for Fortnight Frights. And I watched the live show of that with the Artisan Geek, Seiji. Please don't. And that book was super, super disturbing. So it's just a bunch of short stories, and I was reading them, and then I ended up downloading the audiobook for the last 2 hours of it, so the last couple stories. And some of the stories were just like, they just ended. And you're like, okay, what happened? Like the first story I was listening to, it was just like, and dogs can find bones. And then next story, and I was like, okay, wait, did it switch stories? Or is this like another part of this story or what? So some of them just ended very quickly and randomly, but they were all definitely dark and creepy. And there was some moments in there where I was just like cringing. Definitely trigger warnings for like animal cruelty and talking about a serial killer who kills like little children, like 18 months, 3 years old kind of thing. Definitely trigger warnings for this book, but it was pretty gruesome. I gave it a 3. It's not really my type of story, or stories in this case, but it was well written. It's just not my kind of story, really. It's really creepy and disturbing. But I was glad that I could be part or watch the live show and see what the other hosts thought of it, what people liked about different stories or didn't like, and what stood out to them. And those stories all take place in Argentina. And there's also a prompt for reading a short story. So I think that covers that one for sure. And then the last one, I missed the live show for, but like I said, I'm just watching it now, but it's for the Year of the Witching, which I read the prologue and then like the first 2 pages of the first chapter. As a Christian, I felt it just wasn't, it seemed like it would be blasphemous, and it wasn't something I wanted to read. But I was interested in seeing the live show to see what other people thought of it, if there were other Christians who maybe did choose to read it or chose not to read it for the same reasons or what, and just, I didn't know that the author was going to be part of it, so it was kind of cool to see, like, somebody asked her, how did you come up, what is the religion in the book based on and stuff, and she said that it was kind of based on her own very, very strict life growing up, and it's also more cult-ish than actually a religion. So it's been good to listen to the live show. And so I have the White is for Witching is the next one I have to pick up after. I am currently reading The Hole, which isn't super exciting yet. It's a lot of backstory, actually, but it's based in Korea, and this guy gets into a car accident, and his wife passes away, and he wakes up from a coma, and he's completely paralyzed, and his mother-in-law takes him back to his house and takes care of him. The story goes on from there, and she's, like, digging holes in the backyard, and he's like, why are you doing this? And she's like, that is just... And she said, I'm just finishing what my daughter started. So I'm only on chapter, 3 of that, but it's really short. Like, I'm just reading it on my phone, and it's, 178 pages. It's just taking me a little bit of time to get into it. So I haven't been reading it consistently. And that covers the prompt of a character with a disability, because he's paralyzed. I'm also reading The Only Good Indians, which is also very disturbing, and I probably would not have ever picked it up unless it was one of the books for one of the 3 buddy reads for the Fortnight Frights. I don't even know what I'm reading. I'm like, what is this? What did I just read? So that has definitely been an interesting journey for me. I'm on part 2. That's where I'm at right now. gotta finish that before Halloween. That's when the Fortnight Frights ends, but it's also when the live show is discussion for that book. I gotta finish the whole, hopefully today, and then pick up The White is for Witching, which is still part of the BlackOWeenAthon to cover the Black Witch, but I think the main character is white, but it's written by a Black author, so I'm going to give myself like a half a point for that bingo board. So, yeah, that's all I have to do to update. That's all I have to say for updates for now, and I will hopefully finish this quickly. I'm on the last row before I start the edge rows to wrap it all up. So yeah, I will finish this off here for now. Woo!